Well, thank you, Lavalda. I'm very excited about bringing together the next panel, and the topic is about twin it to win it, and we're exploring the concept of connected automation today. I'm really delighted to have a fantastic panel, and I'm just going to call out them and introduce them. First on the panel, I've got Ollie Kung. Ollie's the Managing Director of Service Delivery at OpenReach and a very passionate change leader. Ollie, we're delighted to have you on the panel. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you, Praveen.
I've also got Bernard Shafrik. Bernard's the Principal Analyst at Forrester. Bernard has been covering the automation space for many years, and he's really, from his vantage point globally, seen the industry mature and now take pivotal turns. So it's absolutely brilliant to have him on the panel as well. Welcome, Bernard.
Thank you, Praveen. It's a real pleasure to be here.
I also have Balakrishna DR, fondly called as Bali, on the panel. So Bali's the SVP, Service Offering Head of some of the verticals. And more importantly, he runs the AI and automation practice at Infosys. So welcome to the panel, Bali.
Thanks, Praveen. Great to be here with this August panel. Thank you.
Lovely. So again, welcome to everyone on the panel. I guess the brief is really about connected automation. And as we look at the space, right, see, automation has shape-shifted large global enterprises and is rewriting the story of human productivity. We also see, though, that many enterprises are currently leveraging automation, sometimes tactically in pockets, to achieve some effort and cost savings, which is probably holding them back from unlocking the true potential. So as enterprises take a more strategic view of automation, data, human interactions, complementary technologies, we believe that there is an opportunity to reimagine business models, so customer interactions and really execution. And we want to explore some of those challenges and levers with our distinguished panel today. So I'm going to go around a bit, some questions specifically to certain panelists and then more broad-based. But really, let's kick it off and look forward to a very active conversation. So again, thanks for being here. I'm really putting out the first question kind of broadly to the whole panel. And like we said, enterprises have come a long way in embracing automation. Yet we find many that are struggling to get scale in their programs beyond the baseline. And kind of the industry defines a baseline sometimes by just the number of RPA bots. May not be the right way. What we wanted to hear from you is, what do you see are the top two challenges in driving automation at scale within enterprises? And maybe, Bernard, we could start with you, given your vantage point.
Sure. So I think the most important one is how we are observing as analysts, automation is organized in companies across the industries. And usually what we are seeing is that there is a kind of centralized automation unit, center of excellence, something like that. And they try to control and manage any automation activity. And therefore, at a certain threshold, they are starting to create their own bottleneck. And complemented by waterfall-like automation projects, which we unfortunately still see around in the majority of cases, prevent scaling as well. What we're also seeing is that corporate IT, if corporate IT is the owner and the trigger of automation, then you can only automate so much. And that's why in my research, I'm pleading for the so-called democratization of automation tools. And that embraces distributing automation skills like RPA mastery, like low-code skills and across the enterprise. And to all those people, the famous business developers or citizen developers who are interested in that. But of course, this requires a different mindset in corporate IT, and this is really hard to achieve. So the willingness to let loose on illusory control and embracing non-professional coders tools like task mining, like process mining. But it also raises the question of corporate IT's mission and the reason to exist for at least some of the IT development units. And this is something that must be addressed. But it's quite rarely seen that these topics are being addressed. And I'm pausing here.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know you've done some work which we will explore a little ahead as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ollie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Bernard. I mean, the key for me to scaling and to get huge value is to have it owned by the business, right? And by the business, I mean the kind of non-corporate center. Now that has to be fully supported by a strong IT function who see automation as a strategic solution, not as a sticky plaster solution. But fundamentally, the problems to be solved, the business case opportunities, the customer service improvements have to be owned and seen by the business, and therefore you do have to have knowledge, understanding of what even if you don't understand how it's done, what it can do, spread into the organization, and that is how we are doing it at OpenReach. I'm not a techie, I'm not a background in technology, but I'm a leader of the teams, and we are embracing it from within. I think the other side of it for me is actually, in particular amongst legacy businesses like ours, we're over a century old. The actual understanding of the processes we currently run and the compliance to those processes, and the data that then helps you to understand what flows through those processes is not as clear as it could be. So we often find very clear opportunities to automate at scale, but actually knowing what's going on behind the scenes, where data is being passed is not as clear as it needs to be. So we often find ourselves needing to do a lot of work before we can get to the level of automation. So for me, those are the two things that are challenging. It's the ownership in the business, true business ownership of the results, and the real knowledge and compliance to existing processes that may be very old.
Thanks, Ollie. And having run businesses and processes, it's always amazes me to find the number of variances that we come up with on process manuals. Isn't it? Bali, your thoughts on challenges?
Yeah, I would agree with Bernard and Ollie. And we've seen that any organization to scale, the democratization, as Bernard actually talked about, is extremely critical. And in fact, some of our strategies that we talk about, bot factory, etc., is to actually help that, so that you have a central repository where you can create this reusable bot, but you can consume it across the organization and allow citizen developers, etc., to easily assemble and automate, and that will be very critical to actually scale. The second point is, I think, some way related to the point that Ollie was making, right? Where we see enterprises hitting a bottleneck is that they look at a process, they look at some task and what can be easily automated as low-hanging fruits. But to really get benefits of significant automation, it is important to look at end-to-end process or customer journey, so to speak, and look through right from the time that customer is actually interacting with the organization to the end of the journey. What are the different processes that get actually, right? It could be even departmental processes, etc. What is that end-to-end customer journey, and how can you actually radically rethink that customer journey, and how can you automate? I think that would be another thing I think would also be important.
Thanks, Bali. Customer journey is important. We're going to explore that concept when we come a little later as well. But Ollie, I want to turn this over to you. And it's been fantastic to see your scale program at OpenReach. Of course, we're delighted to participate in some part of that journey. What we would like to understand from you is share a bit of the secret sauce of how you've built that scale. And I think you started alluding to business ownership, and that's clearly visible. But how have you been able to build that scale out at OpenReach?
Yeah, so I guess to give you a little bit of background. I mean, OpenReach is the company that does all the broadband, or a lot of the broadband for the UK. And in my team, we do kind of service for up to 200,000 customers a week. About 20,000 people doing that. So we're a scale business, and I would say we are scaling our automation program, not having scaled. I'm pleased with the results, but I'm never pleased enough. Right? They can always be bigger and more, and that's the big. That's what I'm challenging my team to keep on pushing. But the reality is, I mean, we started this maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. And, we started with the low hanging fruit, right? We started with showing my business, the things that could be done through some simple automation, through some RPA, through some fairly tactical stuff, really, and got people quite excited with fairly minor benefits, a few FTE here, a little bit of a improvement in customer journey there. And it's been a good 2 to 3 year program to start to scale that up to what we're starting to see now, which is much more RPA at scale, combined with other types of automation that we're doing in the business. I think after a couple of years of doing the kind of the low-hanging fruit, we're now moving to a much more strategic position where we do have a center of excellence, an RPA center of excellence, but that does sit within the business function. It does not sit within our IT function, but it is heavily supported by our IT function. So again, coming back to what Bernard said earlier, this is within the business. I have my teams walking around, sitting by people at their desk, figuring out what they are doing and trying to figure out what the hell we can automate out of it, right? We are reducing those silos of automation because there were lots of people doing bits, some in India, some in the UK. We are now bringing that together within the Centre of Excellence to make sure those things are fully supported, they don't fall over, but also that they link up with each other using the same kind of technology, AssistEdge or whatever else we're using as well. And then we're also starting to look at full end-to-end process re-engineering. So how do we fully understand how we're going to do that? And I'll come back to that maybe a bit later on how we can achieve that. But the secret sauce is really simple. It's 4 things to me. One is operational buy-in. I don't mean the IT people have persuaded the operations it's all right. I mean the operations people are persuading the IT people to come and do it, right? It's got to be not just bought into, but owned by the operation. I think flexible technology approach, our IT functions are amazing. They see automation as a real strategic solution, not just a thing on the side. And then you've got to connect it with the people, right? So subject matter expertise, and I mean the engineers, the people sitting doing the work every day so they can talk to the robotics teams. And then fundamentally, a brilliant development team, whether that's with third parties or internally, you've got to have that. But they're fairly basic building blocks. But for me, it just needs consistency over time. Keep on pushing it. Don't let the failures get in your way, and just keep on growing it to a point where it's now starting to scale at quite pace, and we're quite pleased with it.
Fantastic, Ollie. Yeah, and the element about connecting with the SME is such an important element, and as you scale the program, that will become even more critical. That's interesting. I'm going to flip this over to you, Bernard, and you've written some about the concept of automation adjacent technologies, and it's really about saying that if you're really driving scale automation, there are other tuck-in technologies in some sense that you need to bring on board. So tell us a bit more about that concept, Bernard.
Actually, I don't even know if this is a concept at all. I think it's pretty straightforward, and Ollie already alluded to that. So we all know that RPA, from a technological point of view, it's very good for a couple dedicated automation use cases. However, what I'm seeing so many users struggling with scaling because they try to apply RPA to any automation use case or any automation problem, which obviously doesn't work. So therefore, it's necessary, if you're aspiring as a company to automate end-to-end business processes, and not just a task here or a task there, to dispose of a set of automation technologies. And that's basically the concept. So these are low-code tools that bridge some chasms RPA has left wide open, or decisioning and rules engines, or again, process and task mining, document processing, natural language processing, unstructured content processing, but as well governance functions that allow that democratization or distribution of automation tool capabilities across the company. And these are functions like bot stores, bot quality checks. And this is basically what I mean by RPA adjacent automation technologies.
Thanks, Bernard. Yeah, that's quite a store. I mean, that's quite a list, and we'll probably explore, how do we keep that in some sense, build some controls over it as well, and a little later. But I guess a question kind of potentially to both of you, Bernard and Ollie, is that, and I think you started on it, adjusting to it, Ollie, was that RPA is seen typically as a cost out technology. Use the word, some kind of a bandit, right? And you're talking about adjacent technologies that are broad basing. do you see that automation is now seen as a strategic agenda in the digital transformation agenda, right? The cost out versus the cooler revenue generating customer facing automation. Do you see this as an integral part in your organizations or more broadly in the industry?
Well, I think first of all, I think we're pretty cool in operations as well, right? It's not just the revenue people who are cool. We are. I definitely think my team is awesome. But I don't see these things. I'm a business leader, first and foremost. And I don't see these things as different objectives. If you look in our business, most of our cost is caught up in failed customer experiences, right? So it's not. It's not like an expensive hotel chain where the best customer experience is hugely expensive. The best customer experience in broadband is where you never send an engineer out, right? Where it just works. So most of the cost is also caught up in poor customer experience. So and by the way, that's not just true in our industry. I've worked in car breakdown industry and utility industry and lots of other places. It's very, very clear that's common across many, many organizations where your process and people are involved when things go wrong, not when things go right. So although we often term a lot of these things in cost savings because it's easier to make a business case around cost savings, the reality is getting it right for the customer, and we call it first time, every time on time, getting it right for the customer first time, every time on time is also the best route to an efficient organization as well. And of course that brings with it customer upside benefits, better retention. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks I'm going to change my broadband provider. Something's got to go wrong before you do that, right? So actually, if we keep customers happy, we'll also get better retention and attract more customers in. So I don't see that. It's just about having this core concept, strategic concept of get it right for the customers. They will stay with us, and we'll be more efficient. And everyone's aware, everyone's cool after that, right?
That's fantastic. You've anchored it around the customer's experience.
Yeah.
Amazing. Bernard, your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more than to what just Ollie was saying. So actually nothing to add here, but maybe from an analyst view, an interesting data point to share with you. So in the early days of RPA, marketing around RPA technologies and also the promised benefits, there were, in the majority of cases, all around cost saving, cost cutting, also getting rid of people in some cases. And now that discussion and also the go-to-market and marketing messages of RPA vendors, but also consulting firms went away from that. And now it's more about that, what can we do differently than before? So this discussion is shifting from cost cutting to revenue growth, to exploring new business models by the means of automation technologies. And I like that very much. So actually, I prefer that discussion.
Great. Thanks, Bernard. Wally, I'm just going to get the next one to you. And it's really about trying to understand. So we're painting this picture of almost a very democratized environment, right? Where everybody has the ability and the tools to kind of drive automation. There are two things that come to mind. One is that how in such an environment we keep the overall control ecosystem in place so that the whole business is not running amok. So what are your thoughts from a control perspective, as well as potentially saying, how do we still keep the North Star as the customer experience or the customer business metrics that matter as against more pointed automation? So any thoughts here?
Yeah. So I think as Ollie and Bernard actually alluded to, right, most enterprises have gone away from just looking at it as cost savings to really other business metrics that automation can bring in, right? It is, first is, can you even prevent the issue, right? And it is about the time to resolve rather than actually just about releasing FTE or reducing costs. It is also about your customer satisfaction. Are you able to actually improve the customer satisfaction, right? So one of the key things to actually monitor this is to be able to figure out what those business metrics is and actually be able to monitor that and see how your automation efforts are actually going, right? there are also other kinds of controls that are actually required. It is not about being able to create bots at one time and then that they will actually continue to be there forever. You need to have ways to actually monitor how those bots are working. And there could be, you might actually have built it for certain parts. There might be more exception parts that are actually getting created as you run those processes. So it is about also controlling, to be able to monitor how things are actually working after you implement and what other steps that you have to take to continuously refine. And those would be some of the initial thoughts I have on that.
Great. Thank you, Bali. I want to come back to org design. And Bernard, you've done some work in this space in the whole innovation engagement, innovation models, design models that are necessary in orgs. And Ollie, you talked about how a very interesting business and IT almost being a combined entity embedded within business, right? So ownership from an ownership perspective. So Bernard, maybe starting with you, what's your steer on enterprises to really, what's the right org design to scale?
So I think that automation tools per se should be factored into the technology watch list or the technological portfolio of companies, innovation teams or innovators. And because, as you said, they enable innovation. And unfortunately, I'm seeing this very rarely. And usually automation tools are seen merely as the enablers for or within corporate IT. But being innovative doesn't necessarily require to experiment always with the fanciest emerging technologies money can buy, like quantum computing. And from an organizational point of view, we all know that innovation works best if it occurs everywhere in the company, where everybody sees it as her or his responsibility to ideate, to experiment with technologies, to get your hands dirty, to collaborate with others, sharing similar experiences or similar passions. And the same applies to automation. So I'm favoring distributed organizational models for innovation and also for automation, since they allow scaling, and also the diversity of the contributors reduces failures before you invested a hell lot of money into that. And these distributed models, they don't require that powerful go-to person, and that's what we saw a couple of years back when we compare it to innovation again. There were chief innovation officers or the chief information officer taking over that role in parallel, or the chief digital officer. And since innovation is the responsibility of everybody, you don't need these poor scapegoats any longer, because they're just being blamed whenever the innovation idea is not materializing. And that applies to automation. So the head of an automation center of excellence, no matter if this guy sits in IT or in a line of business, it's not the guy to be fired if the bots don't do what they are supposed to do, or the scaling progress is slower than expected. So federation, in my opinion, is the magic wand to the question about the right organizational setup.
Interesting. So you're proposing that it be distributed, and is that still, where is it owned, or is it important at all?
Of course, you need ownership, and IT is very good at ensuring security, architecture, reusability, flexibility. So these topics, IT units have been very good at for decades. So they should own that piece of automation. So to ensure not too many redundant automations and no overlapping automations and no chasms that are just left and people will build manual workarounds. But then what's getting automated and applying which type of technology and what the experience should look like, that should be owned by the people who will later on use that automation and benefit from that. And sometimes it's the customers. So the people who are working close to their customers should own that piece of automation. So that's what I mean with federation and distribution, a little bit of responsibility for everybody who's collaborating in that whole automation environment, similar to what you do with innovation. But there is not the sole owner of everything, and this is the go-to guy then.
Right. And Oli, just picking up from that, so the structure that you were talking about earlier, is that the way that you've been operationalizing it as well?
Yeah, so it is. But I would say, taking a step back a little bit, though, that's not the important thing is not structure, right? I think people use structure as a reason things work or don't work, and I'm a big believer in the word that Bernard used, collaboration, right? In the end, if you have a set of people who are like-minded in their approach, right, who have got the same objectives, the same strategy, the same vision of the organization, the same belief about what can happen, and people genuinely work well together, right? This isn't, this is where consultants sometimes fall, right? Because consultants will say, here's the business case, you do this, you'll make more money, it's obvious, right? But the reality is people are people, and people have got opinions and egos and histories and backgrounds, and I think working incredibly well together. So, in our organization, I get incredible ideas, innovation and ownership from engineers at the front line, in houses. I get it from the CEO of our business. I get it from our corporate IT teams. I get it from my local, RPA teams. I get it from actually, BT's corporate IT teams as well, who come up with ideas as well. And the challenge is not to be precious, right? I'm not bothered where it comes from, but if it achieves against our strategy and everybody's in it for the same reason, I think you succeed. So for me, alignment, strategic and incentives and objectives, backed by really good collaboration with people who care about what the same things, I think you can probably work with most environments. Clearly, if you haven't got those, you need to change the structure to force that to happen. But that's my view.
Right. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Bernard, on that. So just kind of bringing it together is that if you had to leave, or if you had to pick the top two, kind of enablers that you would want to really set the organization to drive automation at scale, what would your two priorities be? And maybe, Bali, we could start with you.
Yeah, I think before I answer that, just a comment on the structure, right? And I think that is an important piece as well. Within our own organization and where we have actually worked with other organizations, the structure that has worked well is having a central team that does things that is actually done best centrally, right? Selection of tools, the platform, right? If you are actually trying to build something for extraction of knowledge, right, from documentation, right? You build that solution one, but then that is what the team would actually do. This is actually, instead of rediscovering this over and over again within the organization, you actually discover it once. But then the actual, and innovation is not just about actually the technologies, right? It is about innovation of how you apply it. And that is best done in each of the business units. And that is a structure that we have seen actually works well, right? You have a central COE that actually facilitates some of these things, and each of the businesses, then business units figure out how you can actually apply it. And then you need to have a structure that actually enables us and the set of KPIs for that. I think that will be very important. The points that we touched about earlier, to look at processes end to end, right? To actually get the right end-to-end process or customer journeys to see where you can get the maximum benefit. Some of it may be actually retweaking the process itself rather than automating the existing processes, and then democratization so that you actually are able to realize this in scale. I would say those would be the key items.
Lovely. Ollie?
Yeah, I would say, the technology is almost the easy bit. Anybody can go out and buy some of the technology. I would say the people bit is brutally hard, right? Getting people to work together, getting subject matter experts to care. A lot of the time people, relate automation to, risk to my job. And you're getting people beyond that as an organization is challenging. So getting brilliant subject matter experts, collaboration between different people, I think is where most of your resilience has to come. I think the second bit I would say is the data behind it. The data that defines the processes, that enables you to standardize processes and eventually, soon moving beyond rules-based automation to judgment-based automation, reading notes, natural language processing. Those things are not easy, right? This is brutally hard to find your way to do that, especially when there are more variants of any process, anything we do, than you could possibly write down on a big sheet of paper, right? So, I think the technology choices are definitely there, and they're brilliant. We can do cool stuff with them. I think if you can get the people in the right place, the experts, the subject matter experts, everybody else, and you can get the data in the right place and the source of that data, I think we can take it much, much further than we have done today.
So I guess we've kind of run out of time as well. So maybe I'll just kind of take a shot at summarizing this. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your inputs and insights. I think we're all saying that there is a tremendous opportunity of building scale. And if I take a step back, right? So from just knowing your business, the ownership of that, driving that innovation within business, to the right operating models, to the an amazing amount of technology types that are there. So RPA, just RPA, sparse, a lot of adjacent technologies and process intelligence, data intelligence, insights, and so on and so forth. And to be able to curate all this together and bring these together to really drive that step change with the humans in the loop, with the people in the loop, is really what to our mind is connected automation all about. So we kind of see this as a fundamental forging deeper connection between process, data, and people. And that's the cornerstone of what we've been trying to drive as well. So absolutely brilliant to have you all today. And thank you so much again for your inputs and insights. And back to you, Luella.